ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनशृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् ॐ शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये ॐ महागणाधिपतये नमः ॐ गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनशृण्वन्नोति
Hi, it's Mog. Adesh Amukos. Hopefully you can see me. Or more importantly, hopefully you can hear me. Anyways, yeah, give me some feedback if the sound's bad. Anyway, Adesh Amukos, short broadcast going live today, bit of an experiment. And the topic is a topic that I'm kind of interested in. A lot of magical people, a lot of tantric people are interested in our tradition, and I've been kind of thinking about it a lot lately and working with that, which is the topic of the kalas, which may be a bit unfamiliar, be very familiar to some and not at all familiar to others, but hopefully I'll just state the obvious and explain that. I should say that we're on the eve of the eve of the new moon. I guess one of the things that I find works best for me magically over the years, and this is for a long time, is to have some sort of, I suppose I used to call it a kind of attunement, but maybe that sounds a bit new age, but it's kind of, which I don't mind, there's nothing wrong with that, but to in a sense, in the pagan sense, to return to the primary state, you have to kind of make yourself attuned or synchronize your life really with the cosmic tides, with things like, hi Charlotte, things like the primarily the kind of ebb and flow of the moon, but I think there's kind of spirals within spirals. You have the ebb and flow of the moon, hi Jade, but within the month, and also the cycle within the year, and a kind of bigger cycle as well. So the kalas is kind of part of that project really of making yourself closer to the cosmic cycles. I mean, it has its good side, and it's it can be difficult. It can be difficult, sort of, or being because the moon is maybe not all good, if you like, or it has this dark and its light side. And so the closer you get to these things, you have to kind of, sometimes you learn lessons. Anyway, so that's what I'm talking about. I should say, I wanted to say that it's a kind of a dialogue form really for tantric. The primary way for tantrics and Hindus really to spread the word, as it were, is through dialogue. And sometimes the texts themselves, if you ever look at any of the kind of complicated texts, are always set out as a kind of a dialogue between, usually Shiva and Shakti, between a kind of couple really. And there's a kind of interlude. There's an interlude between their lovemaking, which seems to go on for kind of ever. But not exactly forever. There are breaks, and in the breaks they talk. The pillow talk of Shiva and Shakti is to talk about philosophy really, and about the meaning of especially esoteric texts. So the kalas, the philosophy of the kalas, or the techniques of the kalas, I mean, I think they can be for everybody really. I mean, obviously you tend to associate Tantrism with the work of Hai Diti with couples, Hai Rosa with couples, Uh, but that's not always possible. Obviously, a lot of tantric work is solo, or a sort of individual relationship with the god or goddess and the cycles of the moon. Those are the kind of two primary forms. When I say couples, I would think heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, right? Or any sort of couple that you a partner, someone you're working together with, it is a kind of common way for. I don't know if it's a common way, but it is a way, right? That people do these sort of things. Okay, so the Kalas. I should say as well that a lot of these ideas, this is a kind of the Kalas, you would find echoes of this in older systems, in older magical systems, such as the one of ancient Egypt, and that might surprise people, but really that's any culture that has a kind of lunar aspect to it, a lunar calendar, is going to have an esoteric philosophy of the body and the connection with the with the cycle of the moon. So, and that's maybe an area. It's funny. It's very strange how the two sides correspond. I mean, we're just at the end of one cycle now and beginning of another. And the picture I've got, I don't know, on the screen behind me, is of 2 feet, 2 feet of the goddess, really. And maybe you wouldn't associate the feet so much with goddesses, although there's a surprising lot of esoteric lore connected with this particular day. So we're just on the eve now of a new cycle of new moon. So, if what I suppose the idea is, it may be it might inspire you, or you might dream about this, or you might incorporate it in your magical work in some way and feed back, right? That's the idea as a group, as a collective. The idea of kind of going live is to kind of pull us together and share ideas so that we kind of, at least we dream together, and in some sense, and that's quite nice idea, I think. Anyway, the term Kala, which I'm not really able to type this on screen, maybe, but it was in English it would be spelled Kala, so just Kala, but it's a long A at the end. But we won't worry too much about that. In the kind of saved version of this, I put some of the text up. I should say that I'm not really, although I've studied this sort of text, my approach tends to be not so textual. It's more kind of just jump in at a deep end and try things out, which seems like the way to go, really. Anyway, Kala means just simply a part, a piece of something. Now, if in the Western mystery tradition, magical tradition, a lot of us were introduced to this, first heard about this concept from a magician called Kenneth Grant. In several of his books he writes about the magic of the Kalas. And he interprets Kala as being a lunar perfume, a lunar scent of some sort, which, I don't know, I mean, it's the sort of thing you might want to check, but it's not an unusual, it's not a ridiculous idea, actually. It's quite an interesting idea that the different parts of the month may be associated, especially some of these days. And I should say, when I'm talking about parts of the month, I'm also talking about things that happen within your body on certain days, especially, I mean, the theory is mostly derived from the observation of the bodies of women, but I think we could say that it seems to affect everybody in a way. And certain days have certain scents or perfumes associated with them, and that's kind of an interesting idea. Now, you would encounter it, one of the best sources, I think, on this sort of stuff, you'll find in Hindu erotic texts, in fact, are the clearest. Although they're not strictly speaking magical texts, some of the ideas in there are kind of quite clear. And they use a cycle of the moon which is of 30 days, which is as the base cycle. Now, I know there are other kind of schemas in operation, but the 30-day cycle, so 2 halves of kind of 15 days each, is a kind of useful way of looking at this. And we're just at the beginning of the light half now, or it's later on this evening. Now, as I say, the book that I should say, Kenneth Grant's book is Outside the Circus of Time. If you're kind of interested, someone just told me that that's the book that it's in. He says that, or it's the meaning of kala is related to parts of the body, to kind of actual tissues of the body, of which in the Ayurvedic medical system, which is kind of related to the tantric stuff that we do, there are 8 dhatus or parts of the body, things like bone and muscle and flesh and stuff like that. You know, all the different eight basic parts of the body. So I think, and given that in Ayurveda you tend to analyze everything in terms of smell, in terms of fragrance, and one way or another, the idea that the different parts of the bodies, 8 of them, 2 times 8, obviously 16, can give you a certain fragrance. That's not a bad idea, really. It's not a bad clue. Anyway, they're usually said to be 16 kalas, which is weird because I've just told you that there are 30 days in a lunar month. So half of that, so really there should be 15 kalas. So this is a source of endless confusion, trying to work out why they say there are 16. And what is, if you're interested in astronomy or real things, you might wonder, what is 16? What's important about the number 16 anyway? You know, you can think of other numbers like, well, I don't know, 10 or 30, the days of the moon, or 365, but why 16? Why is a 16th part of anything? Which is the other meaning of kala. That's the weird thing. A kala also means a 16th part, 1/16th part, and that's kind of strange, right, to know that. I mean, I know that lots of people who kind of, that maybe that doesn't seem strange. Now, the scholar, I'm not going to do too much academic stuff, David Gordon White, who's kind of quite a big shot scholar that a lot of people relate to, he says, he sums this up as saying that it should be 15. It should be 15, but the Hindus like to round things up to 16, right? That sounds completely arbitrary. And then he says in later texts, they don't just round it up to 16, they round it up to 17 or 18. It's almost like it's all academic. That is theoretical then. Now we're getting into the realm of just pure theory and dogma rather than actual experience of life and of the body. So I was rather struck by that. That's kind of quite a strange idea. Obviously the 16th kala is also thought to be like the whole, the 15 considered as a whole, like the epitome. The only real one in a way is the 16th, the whole, the parts of the whole. So that's another meaning. But as I say, I was a bit disappointed by that when I first read it. And I looked up some of his sources. I have got a bit of paper. A very great scholar, not too much scholarship now, right? Called Jan Gonda, who's, I don't know, I guess he's dead now. And he wrote an article on the number 16 and why that's important in Hinduism, not just in Tantrism. He also tells us, as we're going to get a little bit onto sexual magic with this gets us, because it's on the body, it's going to get us into body magic, and then it's going to get us into sexuality. He starts by telling us the word yoni, which you know what that means. The original meaning of the word yoni is the source, which makes sense. That's very nice. Anyway, he tells us that only one of the whole range of 16 kalas is real, and that's known as the Amrita kala, which means the elixir. So it's almost like a potion that's a collection of all the different kalas together, is also considered as a kala in its own right. It's a kind of magical thing. It's like the philosopher's stone, if you like. And this is the bit that endures when all the other parts come and go. The term, he suggests a term, it's a bit like baker's dozen. I don't really know what a baker's dozen is, but he says a baker's dozen. I don't know, I think a baker's dozen is like not 12, it's an extra one, you get a bit more. You don't get 16, maybe you get 13 in a baker's dozen, I'm not sure. But 16 is a very common collective number in Hinduism, and some say it goes way back before, like into prehistory, really, into the Stone Ages. Not as, yeah, I suppose you say a Stone Age culture, the Indus Valley culture, where they tended to count in a number system which went 2, 4, 8, 16. So, in a way, Tantra, Hinduism as well, it incorporates a lot of very, very old ideas within itself. Anyway, it's difficult to prove why they say that, but it's obviously something to do with the lunar sequence, and something, as I said, to do with the 8 bits of the body which are doubled, and something to do with the 4 directions. So if you get a god and a goddess at each of the 4 directions, that will give you whatever it is. Well, 4 by 4. 4 by 4 directions, if you like. Each direction can itself split into a further 4 will give you the 16. And that was a common way of thinking in the ancient world. So it's not a completely theoretical idea. The idea of cardinality, of orientating yourself to the 4 directions, that's quite important in the psychology of how you practice magic. Anyway, so there are 15 plus 1 kalas in the bright half, and I should say we could debate what happens in the dark half of the moon, and that can be very troublesome. But as I say, I'm going to focus just on one of these now, right? Because, as I say, just because coincidentally this is the one we're talking about tonight, and if I come back in 2 weeks or whatever, or some point in the future, whatever kala or cosmic event is happening on that particular day is the one that I'll kind of focus on. So completely, it's not arbitrary. I'll be following the cycle, wasn't I, in some way? So tonight is the eve of the first kala, and she is known as Kameshvari, who is a goddess. All the goddesses are probably aspects of a great goddess of some sort, perhaps Kali or whatever, certainly in a dark half. So Kameshvari means Lady of Desire. So the first day, the new moon, if you like, the first day of the sequence is sort of ruled over by or the particular kala that you connect with on this day is Kameshvari. And the particular bit of the body, I'm going to kind of show you something in a minute, will explain why I'm talking about bits of the body, is the feet. Thus on the screen behind me are the feet of Kameshvari, and you can see they're kind of covered in red. Now I don't know if that's blood or if that's just red vermilion or whatever. I mean, it's symbolically. If you think about the feet are quite. I suppose it's kind of weird that the Lady of Desire that is represented as arising first of all in the feet, but that might seem surprising at first. But the more you experiment with these ideas and think about these things, the more it makes sense. It really does. And so see now, some people, I suppose in the sort of practice I do with my partner, it's we kind of tend to kind of make it up or just do it intuitively. We work intuitively, thinking about the ideas and trying, because I think you have to relearn this stuff again, really. Whatever it says in great big books, which are very, very long, in the end you have to kind of rediscover these things for yourself. You have to do the experiments and see if it makes sense or not. And sometimes it does. Well, I'd say it does, right? If you do it on the right day. As I say, I'm not saying this is necessarily the right day. There are other points that you could start the cycle on, right? You could start it, I suppose you could start it at the end, if you were thinking of in terms of your own body, if you're a woman, the end of menstruation or something. That occurs in some texts. But I think for some reason what works for me is to actually just use the visual moon and the days of the moon. I think that's the easiest to relate to, and you can feel it in the sky and you can relate to it. And having done this a couple of cycles now, it has an effect. Right? Once you start even just thinking about it, reading the prayers and thinking about these entities, it starts intruding in your life, especially if you do an invocation or a mantra or whatever. It may not be straight away. It may be in a dream that night or the night after. That if you get good at recording your dreams or recognizing things in your dreams, then you'll see that these symbols start erupting into dreams, really. But she does have a mantra. I'm not sure if I can. There are lots. Kamasvari has several mantras, several versions of the mantras, depending on the cult, I think. And I'll tell you a source you can find online from looking at that has got also some of the mantras recorded. If that is the way you like to approach things from long mantras. Long mantras, in my opinion, they're songs, really. They're phonic invocations of a deity. So each one has a particular way of singing them or chanting them or whatever, and that's probably the secret of it. I mean, obviously from your guru they're going to give you it in a certain way, but quite often the way they do it, it'll be in a book anyway, and you can kind of, so I looked at this and I must say we didn't use a mantra a lot in the word, but I thought I'd look at it and work out how I would say it. So I know the first bit, right? How you do this? It goes Om Karasvari Kam, which is almost a mantra in its own right. Om Karasvari Kam. A whole bunch of people doing that. It's great. Om Karasvari Kam, Siddhasvari Swaha, Om Fat Swaha, Om Hrim Guru Swaha. I'll try it again. Om Karasvari Kam, Siddhasvari Swaha, Om Fat Swaha, Om Hrim Guru Swaha. Anyway, that makes a song. So that's a mantra if you like mantra stuff, and there's probably all sorts of secret stuff in there. So the other picture, I'm going to try and swap pictures now. This is where it all goes wrong. Oops. Ah, there you go. You've probably seen this picture before, or something like it. It's a bit stylized. When I kind of record this later, I'll put it up. Obviously, this is. I can't read the caption anyway. This is from an 18th century text, in fact, probably an 18th century erotic text, and often the erotic text. I think you have to combine the esoteric and the erotic text to really get the secret of this. And when you do that, you find there's different versions. Anyway, in my book, Tantra Sadhana, which has got Ganesha on the cover, I think I'm right in saying it's in there. I give the quote of this, right, from the erotic text, and it says, generally speaking, from the full moon day, in fact, the Chandrakala descends by the left side of the woman from the forehead, and it goes through the following places within the body. Each one of these is a kala, or a perfume, if you like. It goes roughly eyes, cheeks, lips, chin, neck, shoulder, armpit, breast, the side of your body, the hip, the pubic region, the genitals, the knee, the ankle, and the foot. So on the new moon, it's in the foot, which is Kamasvari, the foot, which I showed you earlier. And then it takes So each day of the full moon, it moves to a different station through the body, and we're only dealing with the feet, or we're only talking about the feet, because there's 15 stations in this one half. But just that so, but if you follow this cycle, which is takes a certain amount of effort, and you have to tweak it a little bit, then it there's a certain truth to it. There's a definite truth to this stuff, I can tell you. And then obviously in the erotic text it says things like when the Chandrakala is another name for this, a part of the moon, in a woman's, in her scalp, her passion can be aroused, right, which is kind of the idea of the erotic text, by gently touching her hair or combing her hair. If it's in her eyes, cheeks and lips, then she can be kissed passionately, or you should kiss passionately. I say some of these things are a little bit kind of male on female, but it doesn't have to be like that. Not all texts are like that. So check that out in Tantra Magick, or we can talk. We'll gradually, I will talk more about that as we go along. But we're in the feed. I suppose the thing that kalas are also fluids, and we're talking about a thing called, in the posh name for it, fluid gnosis. Gnosis that you get, knowledge that you get, not from someone speaking like me, although you might be lucky and you might get some, but knowledge that you get from the fluid itself, from the taste, if you like, of a person. And obviously in sexuality and in sexual magic and in sexual gnosis, taste plays a big part. I mean, there's more obvious, obviously, when you're talking about kissing and sort of more overt sexual things and cunnilingus or whatever. But with the feet as well, I guess you would say, there is a well-known erotic component to the feet. I should say it's got a kind of cosmic element, as above, but the notion as above, so below, that's a very Hindu thing, right? You get that in Ayurveda. I think they maybe had it in Ayurveda before they had it anywhere else, or certainly at the same time. That idea. And so we're talking about a person's body, but obviously they have a notion that the goddess Kali or Kameshvari or whatever, she doesn't just exist, she exists in the stars, like the goddess knew it. She's kind of lying down across as the Milky Way, really. Because the Milky Way, when you look at it, it does look like the body of a woman, in a sort of stylized way, lying in the heavens. I can show you a diagram of that if that's not clear at some point. But I think ancient people kind of could see that. They could see that the Milky Way is a body. And so in terms of the body and the cycle of the year as the greatest cycle, when creation is finished, when the goddess has finished creation, her creative fire, it kind of dies down and it subsides into her feet, into her left foot, into her toe, in fact. And it kind of lies there dormant until it's aroused and burns its way through the entire universe and through the entire body, which gives rise to quite an interesting purification exercise. Anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I wanted to say, just briefly, there is another book that I've been involved with, called the Siddha Quest for Immortality, which is so popular I've even got a copy of it here to show you. And one of the things in that book that's unusual, that we look, it's a scholarly book, but the scholar gave us something that nobody else had published. And now that's gone, everybody else has kind of copied it now. And it's called Cunnilingus According to the Tantric Siddhas. And I think I'm right in saying it's probably about for all your visions of what Tantrism is, this poem is probably the most explicit and the most obvious version of that. I think people will kind of usually tantric texts are never this direct, right, as they are in this particular poem. This is from the 18th century. It's not a very old poem, but even so, it's incredibly direct. And in the academic book Kiss of the Yogini, he just reproduced this. He didn't even ask really. He kind of thought it was so important, this poem, but you could get it in our version in the Siddha Quest because it's got lots of other poems in there as well. And poetry, the bardic tradition is quite important to the Siddhas, to Tantra really. So it's quite an important way of expressing things. Anyway, I can't possibly read the whole thing because it gets quite explicit, and maybe, you know. Anyway, why spoil the fun? But if I give you the first stage, right? Anyway, it's from a treatise called On the Arrow of Lust, which is in a medieval Tamil text. It says, like a cow which licks tenderly its calf, spread out your tongue broad and lick her yoni, lapping up the juices oozing out like a thirsty dog who laps cool water. And like a worshipper who circumambulates the shrine, pass your tongue over her yoni, right around from left to right, moving in ever narrowing circles till you reach the very centre. Okay, so that was, I think, the first stage. Now, obviously that's fun and joyous in its own right. I've got nothing against that. But one of the remarkable things about this poem is that, contrary to what it says in certain tantric texts, it's obviously that the ritual being described is a joyous ritual of a man and a woman. It's not just him sort of holding back and kind of using her body and then absorbing the juices. They both experience orgasm. They both share sexual fluids at the end of it, and love, and there's a lot of love and joy in the poem, I think you could say. So that's one of the other reasons why that is quite a remarkable view, and it's a view of Tantra that you don't see always in the books. Sometimes they just tell you that it's a little bit sort of male orientated, which, all right, I'm not saying there's some truth in that, but not always. Sometimes other things slip through. Okay, so I've spoken for quite a long time now, longer than I thought. I'll just leave you with some sources. So if you want to do some homework or whatever, on Mike McGee's site, on Lokanath's site, shivashakti.com, which is a huge resource of text, you'll find a document online there called the Nityas, which is another name for these eternal goddesses of the lunar days. These names seem to be kind of synonymous with the Kalas. There are lots of different names, just like yoginis and yakshinis. They all seem to be kind of overlap with each other, really. Depending on which source you use. All like the goddess Lalita, the goddess who plays. Anyway, that's shivashakti.com, and you could just see the first one, which is, and I'll read you that to finish, which is Kamasvari Nitya. And if this is the way you like to tantric ritual, fine. It isn't necessarily that I have to admit the way that I've doing it. I tend to sort of be more intuitive and more sensual in approach, but some people, you know, like a little bit more data, a better mantra, and so each one of the kalas has a particular mandala which you can use. Mandalas, you can paint it and lay it flat on the floor, and which is the place that they're usually put. And there's a description of the goddess Kamasvari, and there are other places that you might find it as well. So the first Nitya in the cycle, as I say, is called Kamasvari, a name which means Lady of Desire. It then gives her vidya, her knowledge, which is all mantra, if you like. Mantras are kind of the voice, magical voices really. They're like the channeled sounds of these goddesses that ancient shamans and magicians put through. Some of these words cannot be translated. They're kind of primal utterances. And it gives another version of the mantra there, which is rather good. A bit longer than the one I gave. Then it gives what's called a jhana, or a meditational image, an image that you can use to meditate on or project onto each other, that says she's red like 10 million suns at dawn, having a crown or a diadem of rubies, wearing a necklace, which is kind of quite a magical thing as well. Special throat ornaments, necklaces, waist chains and rings, and I would have thought not much else really. She's red and has 6 arms and 3 eyes, and wears the crescent moon, so it kind of like the early new moon really, and is smiling softly, so she's in a kind of good mood. She holds a bow made of sugar cane, right? Yeah. And she has arrows made of flowers, so it's a bit like Cupid. She can kind of shoot you with one of those arrows, and you'll fall in love. And you'll feel the rush of love, really. She also has a noose. Kind of love captures you, I suppose. A goad, which is a kind of instrument that they use for driving elephants. So love drives you on. And most of all, a nectar-filled cup full of the elixir of immortality. And she's showing a mudra, which is a hand gesture, which means, I can show you, to dispel, bestow a boon on someone, a boon, to give them something good. And she has the 5 arrows of desire, the god Kama, in her quiver, and the 5 petals are longing, maddening, kindling, enchanting and wasting, which are 5 further forms of this goddess. And it also gives you kind of an esoteric interpretation of the mantra, which is very, very interesting. And sort of Kama Devi's goddess within the goddess, if you like. So that's a deeper, that's a kind of semantic view of this tradition. Okay. So I should say as well, perhaps I hope that was useful to you. In one of the books, which I've forgotten which, because they have the Kunalingas according to the Tamil Siddhas, I couldn't resist but write the kind of reply to that. And you can write your own version. That's, if you express this in poetry, write your own versions of these things as a poem, which would be a kind of quintessential tantric thing to do. Okay, so thank you all for listening and being very patient, and in 2 weeks' time I shall come back and talk a little bit more about the appropriate kala for that, which will be close to the full moon then, and other cosmic ties that we might connect with as a group. So Adesham, of course, and happy dreaming.